All right, guys, I'm back. Mama Cat just woke up, so I'm trying to see if she's going to find the door. Did she go through the door? Hey. Go through the door. It's open. The other door, Mommy. Okay, she went through. All right, hey guys, happy study group time. So for those of you just tuning in, so now we're doing our study group, which is what we do after every period of readings. And so we are doing our study group with A Course in Miracles by Helen Schumann. So I've got it pulled up here. Make sure I get myself situated here. Perfect. So let me find what the spot that we were at last time. See if I can. I think I made I think we're at page 85 because I think we were talking about a few things there. Oh, there we go. We're on the sole responsibility of that was where we were. Perfect. Okay, so we are on page 86, and this is A Course in Miracles, the complete and annotated edition. So for those of you who are following along, this isn't the traditional Course in Miracles book. This is the one that has all of Helen Schumann's notes. And so this is where this was basically the bulk of what she wrote. And then, of course, it got edited down. And then what you see with the blue book is what most people have. But I wanted the notes because I wanted to be able to go through some of what she wrote down. So we're on page 86. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through some of this. She's essentially having a conversation with Christ or with Jesus in the book. And she was Jewish, and then she converted to Catholicism, and then she just became an atheist after that. But she was also a mental health worker and a psychiatrist. So a lot of the stuff that she talks about really digs into the psychology of all of this. And so there's a lot of conversations that have to do with psychology because she would understand, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through sections. I may stop to discuss something, but I'm going to try to get through the section and then we can discuss it. If you guys feel the need to ask me a question pertaining to the subject matter or spiritual-based questions about the topic, I'm down for that. Personal questions I'm going to ignore or skip just because we're done with personal readings now. So this is, again, page 86, section, what is this, 9? So I think this is chapter 9 or section 9. Let me make sure because I want to be sure I'm giving y'all the right. Chapter 2, section chapter 2, section 9. That's where we're at. Got it. All right, so let's jump over here. The correction of fear. You believe that being afraid is involuntary, but I have told you many times that only constructive acts should be involuntary. I said that Christ's control can take over everything that doesn't matter, and Christ's guidance can direct everything that does. If you so will. Fear cannot be Christ-controlled, but it can be self-controlled. Fear is always associated with what does not matter and prevents me from controlling it. The correction is therefore a matter of your will because its presence shows that you have raised the unimportant to a higher level than it warrants. You have thus brought it under your will, where it does not belong. This means you feel responsible for it. The level confusion here is perfectly obvious. The reason that I cannot control fear for you is that you are attempting to raise to the mind level the proper content of lower order reality. I do not foster level confusion, but you can will to correct it. So let's stop there because that's some very important stuff there. So what they're talking about here, what's going on here is basically Christ or Jesus in this conversation is talking to Helen and is basically saying, hey, I wish I could control the fear or the state of lack or the state that you're stuck in. I wish I could control that for you, but it's not my place to control that. That's your place because you're the one who is fostering that state of being, that state of mind, that state of condition. You're the one choosing to sustain it because you believe it exists or it's real. but it isn't real. And I am trying to help you to raise yourself to a different level so that you're no longer affected by that. But I can't go in and arbitrarily just dissolve it or get rid of it, because you're the one holding it true for yourself. You're the one holding it, and you're sustaining that. So in other words, if you are walking in the mud and you're all dirty, you're all covered up in mud, and you go up to Christ and say, hey, I'm dirty, I need to be cleansed, then Christ says, okay, well, you need to, first of all, I can cleanse you. So let's say Christ cleanse you. And then you go back out and play in the mud again or walk in the mud again. Are you going to keep going back every single time? Because that's essentially what you're doing. That's essentially what's going on there. And it's not for Christ to prevent you from walking in the mud when you're choosing to walk in the mud. So what Christ is saying in this conversation is, I'm not going to fix your problems for you. You need to fix your problems yourself. But look at those problems, because they may not actually be problems. They may just be beliefs and ideas that you're holding on to that don't actually exist. And so you're asking me to remove what doesn't exist. You're asking me to get rid of what doesn't exist. I can help trigger that, but ultimately you're the one responsible for sustaining that state, and you're going to have to dissolve it or change it in that way. And so that's what is being said in this conversation. And there's two things I want to add to that. We aren't talking about the Christ of life, because when you think of the historical Christ or the historical Jesus, that was in that time, in that place, which means whatever miracles, whatever things existed and were happened at that time, that is specifically for that time, in that context, with those individuals or those people. We're talking about the Christ of faith now, because she's having a conversation with the Christ of faith, which is the Christ that exists now because of all of the centuries of belief, the centuries of ideas, the centuries of thought, the centuries of devotion and faith. And so that has produced another version of Christ that most people who consider themselves or call themselves Christian or of Christian faith would be familiar with. Most people have no clue who the Christ of history was, because they haven't studied it, nor have they even taken the time to understand that Christ. So there's two versions of Christ. And so the version that we're dealing with here is the Christ of faith. And so the Christ of faith is telling her, essentially, what you believe, what you think is a problem, what you're asking me to fix within you is something that you choose to hold on to, is something that you're choosing to sustain. And so you're asking me to come in and arbitrarily strip you from the opportunity of knowing yourself in your form, truest form. You're asking me to get rid of this challenge that you've given yourself to overcome. You're asking me to essentially fix everything for you, because you believe having a perfect life is what should be the standard and what everybody should experience and exist. But you exist in this form, and you're going through what you're going through for a reason. So you need to understand that. You need to understand what is real and what is not real. And most of the fear and most of the mindset of lack or of fear or of pain and suffering is not real. But you hold to that. So it is real for you. Until you acknowledge it for what it truly is and for what purpose it serves in your life, don't ask me to fix it for you, is pretty much what Christ is saying in this instance. Not in so many words, but that's essentially what Christ is saying in this instance. And that's the thing. You have a lot of people, and let's talk about this for a second. You have a lot of people in this world who have embraced their lower nature or their darker nature, or the nature or part of themselves that is not based in love, that is not based in awareness and self-awareness, that is not based in faith, in true faith. There's a lot of people who don't live in that place. They live in a place of fear, in a place of lack, in a place of hatred or anger or resentment, etc. And yet they feel that just by uttering the word Christ or Jesus, that they automatically are purified, that they're automatically changed and transformed. And what was taught in the Gospels, if you actually read the Gospels, was not the utterance of the word, but the practice of the example that was set. Those are two very different things. Christ, by Christ I am well. What has changed? By Christ's example, I will become well. Big difference. Christ was trying to give an example, not to give you a get out of jail free card. And so most people get that very confused. And so when you have people who are spending all their time in church, or who are walking around with Bibles, or who are using whatever's written in the Gospels, or even written in the Old Testament or the New Testament, depending on which one you buy more into, these people do not have a full grasp of faith or of the principles taught by Jesus, or even the example he set. They only know what they read and they regurgitate. And so today being a perfect example, I think it was last night or today, that guy that went around and shot a bunch of people at different spas or different salons, he killed several people, but he was a devout Christian. And you read all of the things from his friends, he was very Christian. He was very lighthearted. He wasn't really a bad person. He was very kind. He was very devoted to Christ. He walked around at school with the Bible. If you're that obsessed with showing people who you are, that usually says one of two things. That's not actually who you are, and you're trying to get people to believe that that's you because you have issues with yourself. And so you're using that as a way to say, hey everybody, I'm not a bad person. I'm really not a bad person. Look, I have the Bible. It's important. Read the story. Look at Christ. You're trying to convince yourself by convincing others. Two is people who are constantly flashing and branding, which is the Bible is a brand. That already is indicating that you don't have a solid grasp in faith, and you need something to essentially anchor you in that. Because without that, you're completely lost and you're in the woods somewhere. And so that's what that says to me. So this individual who did these things was not a Christian. He wore the shirt. He preached the gospel, but he didn't understand any of it. And so because of that, he walked around and he did these atrocious, horrific things, because only someone who does not understand, who does not fully grasp the lessons and the example set, can do something like that. Someone who does understand it is going to be very, very hard for them to be able to take an action against a living being, not just a human, but a living being, which is why, I know people who they can't even think of the idea of slaughtering an animal or killing an animal, etc., because it's so painful for them. And I understand it because I know the struggle myself, and that's something that I personally have to grapple with myself as well. So when you are really, truly have that set in, and it's a part of who you are, you don't need to walk around branding all the time. It is just who you are. And I know more people who are much more Christian examples, better Christian examples, who you wouldn't even know that they were Christian other than they set the example through their actions. So they set the example, but the only way, they're believers, but they're not walking around, with a cross and with the cross bracelets, making money for the churches, which is what Jesus spoke up against. It's the whole reason why he went into the temple and beat the hell out of everybody, turned all the tables over, let all the animals out, because that's not what he believed. He believed that people should not be making the church rich, and that the church should not have a monopoly on the people's faith and their relationship to God, and that the order should be turned upside down. That's not what we live in the society of right now. Churches make a lot of money, and so they live not by example, but by profit. And so again, there's a big difference, big difference. And if you can't see that, then you do not understand the word. You do not understand the faith. You do not understand the teachings. You just don't. And it's not for me I'm not judging you. I'm just pointing out the obvious, that you are not you do not truly understand the words that Jesus spoke. And so it's one thing to practice it, is another thing to spill it out and say it, but yet nothing in your life is even exemplification of those principles. So that's what they're talking about right here. Okay, going back to this, you would not tolerate insane behavior on your part and would hardly advance the excuse that you could not help it, which is exactly what this kid did. He was like, I had a bad day, so I blew off 8 people's heads. Like, okay, so you would not tolerate insane behavior on your part and would hardly advance the excuse that you could not help it. Why should you tolerate insane thinking? There is a fallacy here you would do well to look at clearly. You believe that you are responsible for what you do, but not for what you think. The truth is that you are responsible for what you think, because it is only at this level that you can exercise choice. What you do comes from what you think. You cannot separate the two by giving autonomy to your behavior. Behavior is controlled by me automatically as soon as you place what you think under my guidance. Whenever you are afraid, it is a sure sign that you have allowed your mind to miscreate. That is, you have not allowed me to guide it. It is pointless to believe that controlling the outcome of misthought can result in real healing. When you are fearful, you have willed wrongfully or wrongly. This is why you feel you are responsible for it. You must change your mind, not your behavior. And this is a matter of will. You do not need guidance except at the mind level. Correction belongs only at the level where causation is possible. The term does not really mean anything at the symptom level where it cannot work. So what is being talked about here, what they're discussing here, is the idea of the thought process, or the beginning thought that you have will basically lead to everything else. And so back last year, when you had a bunch of people spewing their hatred or just going off about random things that they didn't care for, they didn't know anything about, or they were regurgitating what was said at the highest level of the government or whatever, you had a lot of crap being spewed into this reality. And it started with the thought. It started with a thought. And a lot of people went online and saw a YouTube video or a bunch of stuff, and that changed their thoughts. And they allowed themselves to think differently. They made the choice that they were going to allow their thoughts to be aligned with whatever they saw. So they chose to sustain and surrender and continue that thought pattern. And so from those thought patterns, you had people immediately producing a reality and sustaining and buying into a reality that was aligned with those kinds of thoughts, those kinds of beliefs. And so you've got two things happening here. You have a bunch of people believing some things that was not true, that was inaccurate. And then you have a bunch of people who, just by the way they felt in response to everything, knew better. They just knew better, and they knew differently. And so you've got these two realities trying to play it out. And the reality that was rooted in this real world scenario, which is, again, the real world is just a reality that is sustained and supported by the agreement that all of our souls have, and God. All of it is sustained and supported. But when you have an alternate reality spinning off and becoming its own, thing, all of a sudden it starts to fuel and feed all of the people that buy into it. And so what you end up having is people buying into a reality within a reality. And so they're living in their own little bubble, and they're feeding themselves, and they're giving themselves, whatever they need to feel as if that's real. And they're only having more of it fed back to them as well. They're basically recycling the energy. And so those individuals and those people felt the need to take action because of those ideas and those thoughts, the beginning stage of creation. Because God began with a thought. All of creation began with a thought, which then was exemplified in experience. What we are. We are the exemplification of God in this form, in this reality. So these people bought into this reality, started with a thought that led to a system of beliefs, which led to a series of feelings and emotions which verified and validated their experience, their personal experience, and then they felt the need to take action. So they went and took action, which was inappropriate, which was not the right way to produce a more happier, a more functional, a more unified world. Instead, it just produced more of the same. And so at the end of the day, what was believed to have happened did not end up happening. But you still had all those people buying into those ideas and those thoughts. And this is why I say thoughts are so important, because if you, and this is what I was trying to tell the young man earlier in their lives, where if you buy into the idea that you're not worth anything, that nobody wanted you. Oh, my father didn't want me. My mother was so crazy, and she didn't love me enough to not go crazy. Like, you can spin everything around in a way you want to that reinforces fear, or you can use it in a way to prop up your self-awareness, use it as an understanding tool, and then create more love out of it. You have a choice. And so if you are focusing on trying to create more love in this world, we shouldn't be buying into or enforcing thoughts, ideas, and realities based on fear, based on lack, based on this or that. There's a lot of nuances that go along with this, because we can't live in a world that is perfect. We're never going to live in a world that's perfect. We're never going to be in a place here in this physical world that is ideal and that is 100% happy all the time, and everybody's going to have happiness 24/7. Like, that's not happening here. That's what we exist like in the other form. We come here specifically for the drama. So we can't produce a world that is ideal, but we can make a better world, and we can work on it a little bit at a time, and we can build a better world and a safer world for ourselves and for our loved ones and just for our neighbors in general. We can work on that, but it starts with a thought. And if your thought is, the government will never work for us, they can never fix anything, they can never, then you will basically create a reality based on the idea that the government will never do a damn thing for you. But if you believe that it can, it's just full of a bunch of nutheads, then what can you do? What can you do? Do you want to get involved in government? Then go do it. Do you want to bring all your ideas? Just like a Bernie? Do you want to bring all your ideas of equality, or coming in, making sure that everybody has a home, has medicine, has food? Do you want to come in with those ideals? Because I don't think those are bad ideas. I think all of us should have those basic things. We live in a world where that's possible. We're just not doing it out of choice because of profit. So do we want to bring that stronger in and create something for everyone to experience? Because if you got all these people who are use them as examples. You got all these people preaching that, Jesus is going to come down and is going to save all of us, and that we're going to be ascended into heaven and we're going to have perfect lives. Why would you not try to already do that now? Because Jesus talked about that plenty of times. He tried to essentially push his disciples into saying, don't wait for the end to come. Work on it now. Do something right now. Exemplify what you can right now. This is going to help usher in this new world, this kingdom of heaven, this kingdom of God, this kingdom of David. He was trying to give people an idea that they can do those things now. Stop waiting around for someone to save you. And so people didn't listen, and they thought he was there to save them. And so when it didn't transform and everything didn't change, it's like, what do we do now? What do we do now? Well, let's just wait. He's going to come back. Let's just wait. And so they waited. And they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and they waited almost 2,000 years, and we're still waiting. So it's not because they missed the message, they missed the idea. And so you'll notice there's a cyclical pattern that happens in our reality, where every few hundred years or every few generations, there are people who show up in this world, who show up understanding that mastership and exemplify, and are here to help us to evolve to a self-awareness state so that we can take responsibility for ourselves and stop waiting for someone to just, I'm going to be an absolute asshole. And then the day Jesus arrives, Jesus Christ, I'm here for you. I love you. You're my savior. Now we can all have a heavenly thing. That's really crappy for you to believe that you're going to get away with crappy behavior your entire life. And then the moment you accept Jesus Christ into your heart, all of a sudden, all of your wrongs are righted. No, you need to make your life right. You need to get right with yourself in this world, because that's on you. So don't wait for a bailout. Fix your own shit. That's the message. And so that is what is being told here. Fix your shit. Start with your thought. If your thought ain't working, if your thought is producing more fear and more disconnect, you're responsible for that. Change that. And then you can move forward in a different light, and you can bring about the heavenly state on this plane. Corrective learning always begins with awakening the spiritual eye and turning away from belief in physical sight. The reason this entails fear is because you are afraid of what your spiritual eye will see, which was why you closed it in the first place. We said before that the spiritual eye cannot see error and is capable only of looking beyond it to the defense of atonement. There is no doubt that the spiritual eye does produce extreme discomfort by what it sees. I totally get that. That resonates with me so much, because when you become so aware energetically of just people and of life and of everything, to some extent, it can make you very jaded, and you can kind of be like, ugh, which is why I tell you guys, it's so hard for me to get up every morning and to be a part of this world, because I'm just like, so, but I know my purpose here, and I know what I need to do here. But it can make you into a very jaded person. So you have to constantly remind yourself that, yes, there's a lot of crazy people out there. Yes, people, even with the opportunity to be good, to exemplify goodness in front of them, they still choose bad choices, still make bad decisions. That to me is just, but this is what I was telling my partner the other day when we were walking. I said, we're at a pivotal moment in our evolution as human beings, because it doesn't matter. People say, oh, well, people do this because they're educated. They're not educated, or they're ignorant, or this or that. You could say that, but it's not that simple, because I know plenty of people who are very college educated, have all of their credentials, and they still are really crappy people or make bad decisions, because education doesn't make you a self-aware person. Education doesn't make you a compassionate person. Education doesn't make you a considerate person. Those are things that are gained through spiritual evolution, through spiritual involvement, through personal involvement. And so those are things that are gained there. And so people don't always grasp that, even when they're educated. So it doesn't matter whether someone went to school or not. A lot of people who are educated made bad choices, bad decisions, and they continue to do so because they are not self-aware. They do not see things from the heart center, from the spiritual eye. They don't connect the pieces that if I do this, this is going to lead to this, which may lead to this. They don't understand that capacity. They don't have that capacity. They haven't spent any time developing that capacity. This is why you have people who study the Bible through and through 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, going to places and shooting people up, because there's a lack of awareness and self-awareness, and there's just a lack of it. And so this comes from a spiritual deficit. These people are spiritually deficit. They do not understand who they are, why we're here, and our interconnectedness to all of us, to each other. They don't understand that. That is completely missing. It's me, 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 me. Like me. They're like a Muppet. Me, 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 me. So that's where they come from in all of that. And unfortunately, that is a key to ascension. That is a key to amplifying yourself and raising yourself up to a higher state of awareness, to a higher state of being, and to communion with God, with Source, which is what you get when you amplify yourself and bring yourself up to a higher level of awareness. There is no doubt that the spiritual eye does not produce extreme discomfort by what it sees. The thing that you forget is that the discomfort is not the final outcome of its perception. When the spiritual eye is permitted to look upon the defilement of the altar. When he says the defilement of the altar, he's talking about the defilement of the sanctity of life and of human being, meaning that when we defile ourselves, when we act against ourselves and act against each other, that's the defilement of the altar, because we are the altar. We are the thing that allows the presence of God to exist within us, through us, in our beingness. So there is no doubt that the spiritual eye can, again, go back to this. The thing that you forget is that the discomfort is not the final outcome of its perception. When the spiritual eye is permitted to look upon the defilement of the altar, it also looks immediately towards atonement. Nothing which the spiritual eye perceives can induce fear. Everything that results from accurate spiritual awareness merely is channeled towards correction. Discomfort is aroused only to bring the need to correct forcibly into awareness. In other words, so when people immediately recognize and understand the desecration of ourselves and each other, they feel the need to force the correction. When they try to force the correction, usually people tend to look outside of themselves. They blame other people, or they focus on who they can either destroy or get rid of, get out of the way, or defile to do so. And this is what you get. You get people of faith walking around with the clothing or the cloth of Christ, defiling others, destroying others, creating more of that in this world. They do not understand. But they believe, they know something's wrong, but their way of correcting it is by force, through the annihilating or the removing of the problem. the thing about it is we all are God. And so when I'm looking at someone who's the issue, they are God in form as well. So for me to think, if I just can destroy them, get rid of them, get them out of the way, then that solves the problem. It doesn't, because that energy is still there. It exists in this state, in this realm. And so someone else will come along and embody it. If you go out there and you get rid of all the gay people in the world, the next person born tomorrow will be gay, because that is a condition, that is a state of experience that is essentially founded within this reality for the purpose of soul advancement. So it's one thing, just like with other things as well that we all go through and other conditions that we struggle with or we're stuck with. That is part of the process. And so I am born into a Mexican American's body because there are certain things that I, in this perspective, am supposed to experience that will be used by the evolution of my soul. It's part of the game. It's part of the thing. So I accept that and I go with it. So what they're talking about essentially is you can't force change. You can't force righteousness. You can't force a cure upon others. You must learn to love and cooperate. It's not going to be an easy thing. And usually it requires people to concede sometimes, or people to essentially put their swords down and take a risk. But it is possible. And because we have built up a society in a world where violence is okay, where it's acceptable, blowing people's heads off because you don't agree with them or because you had a bad day is acceptable. It's okay. When you grow up in a world where that is okay, beginning with that thought pattern, you're never going to ever evolve to a state, and nor will others that you have to deal with, to where you can say, you know what, I'm going to put my sword down and let's find a different way to work around this or to work through this. You're not going to live in that world, and we're making progress. I'm not saying that everything is going south. Actually, we've come a long way in this reality as human beings. We've come a long way because, back in the day, 2,000 years ago, people didn't talk things out. They just stoned your ass or they took your life. That's what they did to resolve issues. Today, we don't have that happening as often. We don't have, unlimited amounts of events like that happening every single day. Now we're hearing about it here and there. It's a scattering of events, but it's still happening. So we're still working towards our betterness. We're still working towards our evolution in this form. But it's a lot better today than it was 2,000 years ago, because 2,000 years ago, it was perfectly normal that if you were caught cheating on your wife, you could get stoned to death, or your wife could be made responsible because she wasn't doing her duty, and so you felt the need to go cheat on somebody else, and so let's stone her, and so let's just stone her because she just didn't make the right. She wasn't. There's no evidence. There's not, just because we all agreed that that's the reality, and so that was how things were handled in the past. We are not dealing with that today, so there has been improvements, but we still have a ways to go. Healing was an ability which was lent to human beings after the separation, before which it was completely unnecessary. Like all aspects of the space-time belief, healing ability is temporary. However, as long as time persists, healing remains among the stronger human protections. This is because healing always rests on charity, and charity is a way of perceiving the true perfection of another, even if he cannot perceive it himself. Most of the loftier concepts of which humanity is capable now are time dependent. Charity is really a weaker reflection of a much more powerful love encompassment, which is far beyond any form of charity that human can conceive of as yet. Charity is essential to right-mindedness, in the limited sense in which right-mindedness can now be attained. And I'm going to stop there because that's a lot for us to talk about, and I want to go through some of your questions. So what is being said here is that healing is something we all can do. We're not stuck with suffering in all its forms. We can heal, we can recover ourselves. That is separate and that is different from a condition that you're stuck with for your life, because that means that condition, there's an experience through that you're gaining for your soul evolution. But that doesn't mean that all conditions are permanent. You can heal, and there's a lot we have the ability to heal. It starts the simplest way to heal is by embracing or bringing in more love into your life, by either expressing it or by allowing yourself to witness it and to be open to it. But charity is a more subtle form of love. It's basically a gesture of compassion or a gesture of love in simple form to another person. That could trigger and cause a type of healing, but it isn't the best way of it. Love is the best way to heal. And so the embracing of love, the embodiment of love, the expression of love is the embodiment of love in its purest form, in source form, which allows you to evolve and ascend in that moment and achieve a higher level of return to our state, our gracefully state of energy being. So that's what they're talking about in this instance. So let me go through some of the questions that you have about the topic or about spiritual matters, and I'm going to see if I can cover some of them before my time is up here. And again, these are topical questions, not personal questions. All personal questions will be skipped. Yeah, Cassidy says a good thing. She says, anxiety and fear are hard. I suffer from them, but I also acknowledge it. It is because of my perspective and not reality. Correct. Anxiety and fear is something we all experience. It's something everyone experiences. Even the masters experience it. But that doesn't mean that we have to have an experience of suffering or of fear or of anxiety on a regular basis. We can get better at it. I still suffer from anxiety as well. I wouldn't say I suffer from fear. I've actually, and it's really interesting to witness this over the last couple of years as I've really stepped into my faith, stepped into my relationship with Source, stepped into my power and claimed and owned the reality of being God in form. As we all are. I have to say as we all are every time I say that, because then you're going to have people running around saying, oh my God, Ferny thinks he's God. He's the God. He's the, the second coming. God. People love to twist shit. They love those clickable little clickbait things. But I still suffer from anxiety as well, because every time I am doing this work, right before I am about to do it, I know that I'm undertaking something that is very serious. It can also be very impactful in someone's life, and there's a big responsibility that goes along with this. So there's that, and then on top of that, I have to put myself on stage to perform or to do what I say I can do. So all of that comes with anxiety, because I always worry, what if tomorrow I can't do it? What if I become I get Alzheimer's and I can no longer have my mind? I have anxieties, and there are worries, and there are some fears there. But the thing with fear, which has been a really interesting thing to witness, is now when I think of fear, for me, fear isn't so much what I can do or what I'm capable of. Fear is what I don't have control over, or what I am going to experience that I know is part of my path that I may not really care to experience, but I know it's going to happen or things are going to occur. Those are the things that I have a little more anxiety or worry about, just because I want to make sure I did everything I was supposed to do. I want to make sure I fulfilled everything I agreed to in this lifetime. But fear of regular stuff, fear of people, fear of a loss of everything, fear of death, all of those fears have kind of pretty much gone away. Every now and then I might have a little inkling of something, but then it just dissolves. So I don't worry so much, because I know who I am, what I'm capable of, and I know that at the end of the day, I am going to be fine. And if I'm not fine, I'm back with with everybody else in source form. So that fear is not really there as much. So that's where that's really changed. And I do have more of an embracing of love. I do try to offer as much love as I can. I do try to give as much as I can, and what I'm capable of doing. So it changes. It's so interesting to notice that it changes within you. And I've encountered that myself. And not only that, but a lot of the things that I struggled with in the past, a lot of the issues of my childhood, having resentment towards my mother, having resentment towards my stepfather who was very abusive, having resentment towards my father who rejected me. All of those types of things, they kind of went away. And so I remember when I would sit down with my hypnotherapist, because we were doing a lot of shadow work, which is you focusing on the things that have kind of built up within you and are connected to your lower forms. she's like, write a letter to your father and like, write down what he did or how he caused you to feel. And I was like, I don't feel it. Like, it's just not there. And it's like trying to force myself to feel an anger or to feel a resentment. And I'm like, that doesn't even feel natural because I don't feel it. So it's just the most interesting thing to see that shift within you because of the embracing of love, because of the remembering of who we really are in this form. Yeah, Batty says, true transformation is an inside job. That's it. Even has the tendency to separate you from people when you're going through it. Let me read that again because the true transformation is an inside job, which it is. You have to start from within, which is what I was trying to tell the gentleman. I think his name was Jose. That's if even has the tendency to separate you from people when you're going through it. Not sure I understand that second part. I think I have a grasp, but I'm not sure I understand that second part. You might need to add to that because I might need to see more of that. 2020 was an example of how manifestation can go very wrong. Yeah. So yes and no. So here's the thing. We're always manifesting. We're never unmanifesting. We're always manifesting. The problem is that when you get into people who believe something and they follow those thoughts and they allow themselves to buy into that, it creates a collective manifestation. And that's when you start having these collectives, let's call it a collective belief system or a collective with a belief system, because there's so many people believing and having faith and buying into it. Power is in the numbers, right? Power is in the numbers. So those groups, those people were going to have experiences that were going to verify and validate what they were going through. They were going to 100%, like, how can this not have been real? How can this not have been real? Because enough of you believed it that it turned it into a reality for some of you. And for those of us who were still attached to the main reality, we didn't get caught up in that. We didn't get swept up into that. So that's why, because you can still produce a reality within a reality. That's possible. And 2020 has shown us that. Not only that, but this is why the Catholic Church, which is the foundation of Christianity, we may have other denominations of Christianity, but ultimately the Christian Church, the Catholic Christian Church, is what produced Christianity in this world and created the powerhouse of it. And so they essentially took historical things that occurred, historical elements, they tied it in with a bunch of people's opinions and beliefs who were perpetuating the stories, and they created something from that may not have been as very closely tied to the actual event itself. And so because of it, all of these people across the world who were illiterate, 99% of the people in the world at that time were illiterate. They did not know how to read. Jesus did not even know how to read. According to history, he didn't know how to read. But a majority of those people at that time didn't know how to read. And also, remember, Jesus spoke Aramaic, but the Bible was first created and produced in Greek because it was produced by the Romans, who were trying to, essentially Constantine and a bunch of people, but they were trying to create a unified belief system, and they were all trying to form this idea. So they created it in Greek because the reading audience was Greek, not Aramaic. Most of the Jews and most of the people during Jesus' time spoke Aramaic. So that wasn't even, not only that, but one of the first gospels might have actually been written in Aramaic, but the first actual gospels that we know of were in Greek. Big difference in change in translation and conversation there. But they were written by Romans, and they created this entire identity and so forth. So there's elements that are probably true, and I'm pretty sure they are true. There's a lot that isn't. And so you get a bunch of people buying into this idea of Jesus came to save us and died for our sins. Because he died for our sins, we're all saved. And as long as you accept Jesus as your Savior, you're saved, and you're part of the percentage of people who are going to get chosen to exist in paradise. No matter what you did, exist in paradise. Everybody else who doesn't want to accept Jesus into their heart, they're going to rot and they're going to suffer. So there's this big belief, and there's this whole storyline that goes along with it. When he didn't really speak that way or talk about those things, but that's what people believe because that's how things have been made for people to buy into. So they believed into the system. Not only that, but most people don't realize that Constantine was not Christian. He just embodied the religion, because at that time during the time of Constantine, people don't know this. This is historics, right? This is history. Emperor Constantine at that time, the Roman Empire was split into 4 separate sections. You have 4 separate sections, and so there was a lot of infighting. And so think of it that way. And so he got rid of a few of his rivals, and then he became emperor, and he was the go-to person. But at that point, the Christian faith, which was a new religion, a lot of people didn't even buy into it, because you had all of the people who were Hellenistic or who were pagans, which at that time, the only people who existed in the world that we know of were the Jews. They were the only ones who believed in a monotheistic religion, which means there's only one God. Everybody else believed in multiple gods, right? So you have the Christians coming along, building their entire belief system on the Jewish faith, which is the Old Testament, and then spinning it into a new religion, which is Christianity, based on what these 4 gospels said. You got all these people around with different versions of what they thought Christianity was. And so, but it's spreading. It's the QAnon of the time. Christianity during the 1st and 2nd centuries were the QAnoners of the time, and people thought they were crazy. And so as the story continued to spread, it became this belief. It's like, oh my God, this is such an incredible story. This is such an incredible idea. Like, I am not a bad person. Well, I am bad according to the book. I am bad according to what they tell us that we are, but I don't have to be a bad person, and I can be an incredible, I can have happiness and joy forever. So people bought into it because they were in caves as slaves, and so they wanted something to believe in. This was the faith that gave them hope. And so it spread like wildfire mostly amongst the poorer parts of the empire. You still had people who had money, who were wealthy, who did buy into the religion. And actually some of the first churches that were built were actually built by wealthy women who were part of the Roman Empire. So a lot of people don't know these details, but it spread throughout the empire. And Constantine is like, oh crap, like half the Senate believes in QAnon. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because all these people believe in it. I can't take that away. I really want to take advantage of unifying everybody. And so the pagans who were much more focused on traditions and rituals and so forth, he was like, what do I do? So he kind of basically brought all of the Christian orders together, and they said, we need to come up with something that'll work for everybody. But he himself was not a Christian. He actually believed in a different religion based on a different figure. You have to look it up because I forgot the name of the guy. It starts with an M. But anyways, he took the idea of that God, supposedly, and he actually threw it in there. And some of the ideas that we have with Christianity, some of the big hats, etc., actually come from his beliefs with this other sect or God that he believed in. And so he even created a monument to himself to this God, who is essentially a kind of a spin-off of what you would consider the now Jesus of faith. And so all of that stuff got meshed in together. But he was just trying to unify people and bring people together and get control of the empire. And that's what he was trying to do. So you had all these people who were QAnoners essentially given the entire empire and allowed to produce a civilization and a culture based around their ideas. And now we have the Roman Catholic Church all those years. Now we have the periods of the Inquisition. Now we have all of that genocide that happened because of it. And so that's the power of an idea and a thought. We've already seen it play out in history. So if you gave all the QAnoners, the ropes, I'm pretty sure we would end up with a really crazy reality, and we would probably end up with this Handmaid's Tales type of scenario. But that's the power of an idea. Now, this is why when I had a conversation with a friend once, and I was like, we have to make sure that it is not okay to sustain or support ideas or thoughts that have no basis in reality, that are corrupting people's sense of being. It's corrupting them from the inside out, and they don't even realize it because they think they're saving the children underneath the Pizza Hut or the Domino's. So we cannot allow people to sustain an idea and think that it's okay and make that something that is actually a institution in our world, because it's going to essentially be another. It is the second coming. It's essentially Christianity all over again. When what we actually know historically from the idea and the history and what's been written about Christ is very different from what people believe nowadays about Christ. So it's going to become the new Christianity, and it's going to completely turn this world into a war zone, and everybody's going to be trying to chop everybody else's head off because, oh, you're not wearing the color red, you're a heretic, and you need to be destroyed. I want to burn you, just like those Jews. Like, that's how they are. Because the mindset is there, because it's okay to have an idea that you can be cruel to another human being. It's okay to think of a Jewish person as an evil person. That's what these people believe in, and they perpetuate it and perpetuate it. It is not okay. It is not okay to destroy or to dissolve or to diminish another human being. It is not okay. And it is not a high principle of spirituality. And it is not an idea that the masters have sustained and supported themselves. But that's what you get when you allow ideas to begin to become facts or to become realities when there's no basis in it. It is not a good thing to take a life, because the person who is dying or being killed is suffering. The person who is taking the life is losing a part of themselves in the process. And usually that first time that they take a life is where they lose their soul in, right? In that moment, they lose a piece of themselves. And ask anyone who's been in war, who's had to take another human life, how did it feel that first time you took a life? What thoughts were going on in your mind? What did you feel? Unless they are psychotic and they actually have a brain dysfunction, which most of these serial killers do, there's something wrong inside that is not letting them experience or feel the compassion and the connection with other people. If you ask an average human being who has a capacity for love and who has a capacity for compassion, how did it feel the first time they took a life? It's not going to be something, oh, I loved it. It was so much fun. I enjoyed it. It is such a high. I was like buzzing after I crushed that man's throat for like weeks after that. No, most people who are good people, who are rooted at the core of what's right and what's wrong, are not going to say that. Only people who something's wrong upstairs or something broke down the line where they don't have that capacity, that's the only time it's okay. So you have to understand reality from like what we make up. And this is a personal gripe. This is why I struggle sometimes with like these games where we're teaching our kids how to shoot in these like live action games, because those are people who trained on games who were over there, running into the Capitol and like gouging people's eyes out. That's what you get from that, because the idea started with it's okay to play a game where I can take a life. It's okay to play a game like that. And so it desensitizes them to the actual experience of killing people. And then they go out and do it and think it's just a game. It's not a game. It's real life. That person was alive for 20, 30, 40 years. There's a lifetime of experience there. There are people tied to that individual. There's a lot connected to that. And you just think of it as like an idea in your head. It's okay. So, let's see. The screen is reflecting off the lenses of your glasses, and your eyes are blue squares of light. Are they really? To focus on your eyes when you speak. I wear my glasses when I study because it helps me to connect with that part of myself that taps into some of those information and some of that higher knowledge. So that's why I wear glasses when I do study groups. So sorry if that was bothering you. That this many people can be a part of something like QAnon really scares me, because people, they want to believe in something, and if what they exist in or what's their reality isn't working for them, then what can I believe in that is going to help me feel hope? And for some people, this was actually a hope that they had. They hoped something. They were believing in something that made them feel like there was some better world coming for them. Okay, let's go through this because there's a few people here. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Start as Sarah's like, because most people are sheep and cannot think on their own. That is why politics and religion go hand in hand. Yeah, we're all sheep. We are all sheep. The people who keep calling everybody sheeps are sheep in one way or another. All of us who are called sheep are sheep. We're all sheep because we tend to run with herd mentality. All of us operate from a herd mentality. Every now and then you might run into someone who isn't operating from a herd mindset, but most of us at some point or another have operated from a herd mentality. And you can't say that you have never gotten on the bandwagon of something if it was becoming a big deal or it was becoming something at that time. But yeah, I say we're all sheep. I say we're all sheep. We're all sheep. We're all racist. We all have the ability to be very selfish. We all can be very self-involved. We are all those things. We're all those things because it's a part of being human. But it's what you choose that makes the difference. It's what you choose to put in your energy into. That's what makes the difference. But we are all these things because it's a human frailty. No human being has the ability to be 100% above all of the traits that, we can point the finger with other words. You have not sinned, cast the first stone. That's pretty much the teaching there because Jesus knew better. Here. Knew it. It's like, I know we're all fools and all of this. Yes, have to have accountability. Going through here. Michelle says, so we have to change our thoughts to positive to get rid of negative ones if we want things better, right? Not necessarily, because it's hard to go from being upset and angry immediately to, I'm happy, everything's great in the world, I'm so happy. No, it's like you can't make that jump. It's like there's not enough there for you to pivot emotionally in that way. When you're pissed, you're just pissed. And so what I would say is whatever you experience on an emotional level from a human being standpoint, allow yourself the experience of the emotion. You don't have to act on it, but allow yourself the experience of the emotion. And then once you start to settle within that, then start to remember that this is not what it is about and that this might just be one moment or one experience. At that point, address the experience or the issue, and then you can start to pivot back and focus on something else that is going to produce more happier, positive experiences in your life. But you can't just do a hard pivot like that. It's too hard to do because you're caught up in the moment. So you have to wait a moment and let yourself get calmed down. The reason why I use my cats as an example, because I remember back when I lived in Houston, Mama Cat she would go in and out, and she was always outside. And the two girls, our cats, Indiara and Chanel, we would let them out as well. And so they would go outside or whatever. And one day, another cat jumped into the backyard, and Mama Cat went after that cat, and they were doing this whole thing. And then the other two girls, Chanel and Indiara, ran up to the freaking cat thing, and they were like, what's going on? And then in the process of that happening, the cat that jumped into the yard took off, and then Mama Cat, thinking that one of the girls was the same cat, got into it because she was in the heat of battle. So she was like, so she was fighting with one of the girls, and then that girl went off, Indiara went off, and then she saw Chanel, and then she ran and attacked. She was doing this because she was in the heat of it in the moment. And so I was like, no. So I was like freaking out. It was a big thing, right? I ran up and I grabbed Mama Cat to lift her up so that I could take her away. And then she started attacking me because in the moment she was caught up in the heat of the experience, and it was hard. So she couldn't do a hard pivot. We're human beings. We're the same way. When we're caught up in our emotions and our lower level being, it's too hard to pivot to a positive state of mind. You just have to embrace the emotional experience. Try to limit your reaction within that so that at least you're aware. If you need to react, then you need to react. But if you don't need to and it's not necessary, just to have the experience of emotion and then bring yourself to a settling within that, and then start to say, okay, what can I do to fix this, or what can I do to change this? If I can't change it, then I need to focus on something else. And you focus on something else, you distract yourself with something else as a pivot. And that will help you to get back to a better state of mind. And that's how you do it. Yeah, healing can be about changing the way you think about a problem. Healing can be about changing the way you think about a problem, because the perspective makes everything. So it just depends on how you want to look at it, because you can have the exact same event happen, but two separate two separate perspectives can completely change the way you receive it. And so it just depends. So for example, and I use this as an example because it just happened, you have the stimulus checks that just came out. People got stimulus checks last year, right? They got stimulus checks last year. And there was a bunch of people who were like, whatever, I hate this person, I hate that person, and I don't give them credit for that, and they're not going to get credit for that. And so, but, I'll still take the money. So they still took the money and they used it. And then now, it's in the opposite side. You have a different group of people who made that stimulus check possible. And then you've got people who are like, it's the exact same thing. They are still getting money from the government, but it's from a different group of people. So they feel awful about it or they don't like it, but they're still taking the money. It's the same exact situation in two different perspectives from in its exact same scenario. Granted, the little details might have changed, but it's essentially the same scenario. And so that's what I'm saying when I say the perspective is what's going to make the difference for you. Because people were like, I'll take this check this time. I'll take this check, even though it might have been less. I'll take that check. But last year when they took the check, they hated it. So it's like hating the experience of receiving money, but not liking the experience of where they were getting it from. And it's the same thing though. So let's see. Yeah, Annie says, my issue is grief, so much grief. I am so grateful for the awareness you have helped me achieve that has shown me the evidence that helps drive it back and make room for love. Yeah, grief, I still grieve. If we lose somebody, I'm going to grieve. And at this point, it's the people that I have the closest bond with, because that's going to be the one that has the biggest impact on my life at this point. But I have family members who have passed, and even though I may have, like, for example, my godmother who passed away a couple of weeks ago, or 2-3 weeks ago, when she passed away, when I was younger, she was a lot more involved in my life. And so there was a lot more connection and bond with her. Over time, I haven't really had much to do with her, just because my life has taken me in a different direction, and so I'm not as involved with that part of the family. But I still love her and I still care for my aunt, and I know that it is going to impact my sister the most, my youngest sister, because she was raised by her as if she were her daughter. My sister she had just been a few months old when she was handed over to my godmother, and that she was raised by them since then. And so that's their parents. That's her parents essentially. So I feel bad for that, and I feel bad for that as well. But for myself, because I do this work and I connect with them all the time, I don't feel the loss as greatly, and it feels differently. Granted, if it's someone that's going to be closer to me, I'm going to feel it much more, because again, it's the interaction and engagement. If my partner dies, I'm going to miss him tremendously, and I would be devastated. I think the worst for me will be when my mama cat passes away, because I feel like my mama cat is like my soulmate. So for me, that's, hey. So Chanel. Chanel's like, did you just say mama cat? And I'm right here trying to get your attention. But for me, it would be mama cat. But it's just like what you share the most, the closest bond with. But for me, there's no death. There's just, okay, I'm not in my body anymore. I'm there now. And because I've visited there, I've had experiences being there. I know what it's like for them to some extent. I don't feel grief on the level of like they're gone and there's no more of them. For me, it's more like, okay, well, they're not here with me anymore. I got to figure this out without them, or I'm going to have to learn to live without them. But I'm going to see them again, but it's just not right now. And so I think of people who have passed as if they've retired, they've gone to a tropical island, and they don't have any internet or phone service. And so I just have to wait till it's my time to retire to catch up with them. That's how I think of it, because for me, that really is the way it is in my head. So let's see. I'm going through here because I want to get to religion is created for a purpose to give people religion. Yeah, and Sarah's like, religion is just, think of religion as a pair of shoes. All religions are like pairs of shoes. If you need a pair of shoes to walk, go for it. Use the pair of shoes. Let it help you get to where you want to get to. If you don't need religion to get to where you want to get to, that's okay too. You don't need to have a religion to get there either. So for me, I'm not a religious person. I'm a spiritual person, but I appreciate the religions. I appreciate Christianity and I appreciate Catholicism just because that's how I was raised. And so I still appreciate the traditions and some of the rituals, etc. But I don't base my life on the ideas or on the philosophies or on the beliefs of mainstream Catholicism because it doesn't serve my purpose and what I'm here to do. So, and then, when you just heard right now, like, people were really upset about the Pope and the Vatican and how they said, we're basically telling you, if you're gay, you're a sinner. We can't bless sins. We can't bless sinners. So we can't bless, unions or same-sex unions. I wasn't really disappointed at all because the Catholic Church is about the Catholic Church. It's not about, equality, or the Catholic Church is not here to make the world a better place. The Catholic Church is here to sustain the Catholic faith and the Catholic religion. That's its number one focus. And so for people to believe that the Catholic Church exists to make this world a better place, it does not, because an estimated 700 million people have been killed with the approval of the Catholic faith and Catholic Church over the last 2,000 years. So it hasn't really done a big job of making this world a better place. It's done it's done a really great job of destroying entire civilizations and cultures and killing a lot of people. It may have given people faith and may have given people guidance and support. And in that way, I would say, yes, it has done some good. But the amount of pain and suffering that religion has produced in this world in comparison to what good they've done, big difference. And because I'm Catholic, I can say that because I speak from experience and I know. So that's why I don't associate myself with the Catholic faith. I still will go to church. I will still step into a church and I will still take part in some of the rituals because it's my upbringing. But it's not necessarily, I don't associate myself with the Catholic faith because it doesn't represent who I am as a person. And I can't even think of taking another person's life. So to think that it's okay to drown someone or to burn someone alive or to hang someone because someone else called them a witch because they had an ability or they were psychic, to hell with that. I don't think so. That's bullshit. Hey, Sandra. All right, I think I am done. Inherently selfish, exactly. Someone has said, so with that rationale, abortion is taking a life. It is a soul. Are you stating they are the same as one who has killed someone in war? So this is a very, very complex question on so many different levels, and let me tell you why. If you care about life, there is a hierarchy of life. There's a hierarchy. A person who exists, who is a child, who is starving to death because the family cannot afford to put food on the table, outranks in the hierarchy of life, outranks a child who is partially developed in someone's womb. Outranks it. You can say it's the same. It is not the same. It is two different things because this child has already existed. It is here and it has experienced something. It is a sentient, self-aware being. So in that hierarchy, that living child who is starving to death is more of a priority than the partially constructed child in someone's womb. I'm not saying that we should not consider the child in the womb because my mother was pressured into getting an abortion by my father. Had she listened to him and done it, I wouldn't be here. But she didn't. I am the product. It's crazy for me to say this because I am the product of not being aborted. I'm the product of not being aborted. With that being said, a child who exists who is starving to death at the age of 3, 4, 5 outranks it is more of a priority than a child in the womb that is still being built, still being created. So if a religious organization is going to stand for life and they focus on this, the child that is still in the womb, but completely ignore the starving child at the border, or the starving child in another country, or the starving child in our country, because there are children starving in our country, then that person is completely, they can't connect the dots in their head, because at that point it's a religious argument, not a humanitarian one. You're human first, you're religious second. That's just the way it is. So human first, religious second. So if you're human first, you must help with the support and the sustenance of a human life that is already existing, which means you put your money towards that child that is starving. You put your effort towards helping children find homes who are sitting in orphanages. You should be focused on that, not on the child that hasn't even come into existence yet. It exists in idea, and it is coming into being. It is not fully formed yet. The child that is fully formed, that is in an orphanage, is a priority. That is where the attention should go. So that's number one. That's where our attention should go. That's where our focus should go. That's where our intent to support life on this planet should go. Also, I have the unique experience of having spoken to aborted children because of the work that I do. And over and over again have I been told by them that they do not use bodies that will not be used. They will not use a body that will not be used. Some of those children come in because their soul's task is to put that person in a position where they have to become self-aware of their choices. And if someone is going around and not being aware of their choices, and they're not considering who else could be affected, and then they become pregnant, and then they're like, maybe I'm going to abort it, and they abort it, they have to live with the consequences of those actions. And that's not a fun thing to go through. I know many people who have had abortions, and I can tell you this, it is not a decision that people make so easily. It is something that they have to struggle with and they have to suffer through. And so I know someone who had an abortion, and she grieved for months after that. I mean, she was not right after that for a while, because that was such a painful thing for her to do. And the way that they did it was a very painful experience for her. So fast forward 10 years, she had a child. That child is her world. And she's able to love that child more than she was ever able to get love from her own parents, or even love herself, because of that one experience that she had with the abortion. And so that abortion taught her to be a better human being. And so she's a better mother because of it. And so that experience served her in that way. I'm not saying every abortion teaches a person. Every single situation is different. And I've talked to many children who were souls, because we're all souls, we're all adults. We're all adult souls. We're not all children souls. We're adult souls. And so if we're coming into life, we choose who we're going to be born to. And so we make that choice. And so if someone is going to be, if a child is going to be aborted, that soul, if they're really trying to get into that parent, they're going to keep coming back and back and back. So it's not a new soul every single time that someone is pregnant. It is a soul that is like, okay, here's my entrance into this person's life. Oh, didn't use it. Let me try it again. Okay, this isn't going to work out. Let me try somebody else, because this person's hell-bent on continuing them and perpetuating that. So in that instance, from my experience in talking to them, they don't use bodies that are going to be aborted. They may come in if they have to fulfill an agreement with that soul, which is the parent, for the experience that they're going to give them. But most times they will not use that body, and instead they'll just keep trying to get back in. And I know people will fight me on that. You can fight me on that. You can say this or that. I'm not going to disagree or dispute your opinion, because you have a right to your opinion. But when you are choosing a partially constructed human being who may not even have the neurological mechanisms to understand themselves over a starving child because of a different nationality, then your priorities are jacked up, and you need to get right with reality, because you're focused on a religious idea, not on a human need, or a human condition, or a human emergency. So you got to get right in your head. You just got to get right in your head, because it's an issue of connecting the dots there. And that's what I was talking about earlier. Some people just don't have that ability. So, all right, guys, I think I'm done, because I got to get to getting. But I love you all, and I will be back on Friday for our Conversations with God discussion. So, all right, guys, I love you all. I wish you the very best.